Well, Razorback fans, we know the Razorback basketball season is in full swing. Just a couple games left before SEC play, and then they got to go and face a team that happens to be number one in the country on the road in Tennessee. But what do we need to see from them before they get to that point? Well, let's talk about it on today's Locked On Razorbacks podcast.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. I am your host, John Nabors. I am also the host of Inside Arkansas Live, which you can catch every weekday starting at noon on Inside Arkansas and InsideArkansas.com. Very special edition today, a little Pod at the Palace edition, if you will, as we have a very special guest, Curtis Wilkerson of Inside Arkansas, covers all things Razorback basketball and all things for the Razorbacks. But it's been a while, Curtis. Appreciate you joining us. How you doing this afternoon, man?
Doing good, man. Yeah, I feel a little bit lost because, Arkansas basketball's got a week between games here, but it's a good time to kind of reflect on what we've seen so far, what we need to see moving forward. And, there's also plenty of football transfer portal stuff to keep us occupied.
Yeah, almost too much so. So it's nice to take a break from Razorback football and all the nonsense going on there. But for basketball, we know that Arkansas got a nice win, a great win, their best win against Michigan last week, took care of business in convincing fashion against UCA. Still a lot of work to do, but just where it stands at right now in this point in time, how is the Razorback stacking up as far as the expectations? And also at this point in time of the season, do you still feel confident that this is a team that could have a major upside and have a great postseason play once the tournament comes around?
I mean, I got to tell you, I feel a lot more confident about that than I did, this time a week ago, probably. It was a huge week for Arkansas. You mentioned the big win. They needed it. You're right. For a lot of reasons, for their own confidence to kind of get their swagger back a little bit. And then obviously for the metrics and the resume and all that, go to Madison Square Garden, having that performance, beating a top 15 Michigan team, really good for them. And then kind of doubling down and a little bit of a letdown spot against an inferior opponent, but just having kind of a wire-to-wire ho-hum win over UCA over the weekend. Haven't had too many of those, honestly. So it was a good week for Arkansas. Yes, I do feel still confident about the prospects of this team. On one hand, you look at it and you go, man, the SEC is absolutely loaded. This is going to be a gauntlet. How are they going to handle it? What is this going to look like? But then you're starting to see the potential of this roster. And I think that the biggest part of it is they're getting a little bit more and more healthy, and there's setbacks here and there. But the emergence of Jonas Aidoo, you're finally seeing what he's all about. Huge for the Razorbacks. Trevon Brazil kind of flipping the switch. We've seen another gear from him. Big time development. These guys are starting to settle in a little bit. Maybe get comfortable in some roles, and you're starting to see the vision of what John Calipari was saying to us, which was, hey, be patient. This thing's going to look a lot different once we get into January, February than it does early in the season. And for a while, we were like, well, buddy, I hope you're right, because we're not seeing it. Now we're starting to see it. You feel a little bit more confident.
So just looking at the rest of the slate before SEC play starts up, which we know Arkansas has got two more games in the non-conference against NC A&T this weekend, as well as Oakland, which is interesting for its own reasons because of what happened to Kentucky last year in the tournament. But still, you got two games left. Getting healthy is, of course, the number one thing. But in these two games, before you take on the number one team in the country, in Tennessee on the road, what are some things you'd like to see in these next two games from either individual players or just from the team in general to make you feel a little bit more confident that maybe they don't beat Tennessee, but they at least go in there with a lot of confidence and play really well?
Yeah, I think if you get a couple more games where you get off to a good start, which has been an issue for Arkansas, but they did get off to a good start against UCA, and you saw it carry over for the entire game, just coming closer to putting together a full 40 minutes. There are times throughout the course of the year where you look at Arkansas and you're like, man, they're as good as anybody. They could beat any team in the country. And then, like there's a timeout, and then 5 minutes later, you're going, oh man, like these dudes could lose to anyone in the country. That's kind of been the up and down. And so a little bit more consistency there. I think a big part of it, John, is, you have 2 games in 2 weeks or whatever. And so, yes, it gives you time to kind of recharge the batteries. Guys who, haven't been healthy can get over those bumps and bruises or the sickness that's been around the team, get cleared up from that. That's good because they've had all their guys available, but they haven't been at full strength yet. Like even if they've had all 9, somebody's had an ankle, somebody's had the flu, whatever, there's always something going on. And so getting that will be important, but just the continuity and the chemistry that you can build from practice. How many times has Cal said, we scrimmaged 2 times this entire season and somebody got hurt? Well, now they should be able to do that. And it's going to help you maybe put in some new wrinkles, but just get these guys comfortable with each other. Continuing to see Jonas Aidoo reestablish himself as the all SEC caliber player that he is. We've seen that now for 2 games. Continuing to build on it, I think, is going to be important. Really like the prospects of Arkansas's front court when it's healthy. I mean, if you can have Jonas Aidoo as your bona fide starter in there, and then Big Z kind of complimenting him as a change of pace backup, and then with Trevon Brazil's emergence and a healthy Aidoo Thero, you got a really good combination there at the 4 and 5. We just haven't been able to see it all at once yet. So hammering down some of those things, cutting down on the turnovers a little bit. They had a great assist game with 23 against UCA. That's awesome. A dozen turnovers, a little bit too many. And they've been a little bit too turnover prone. That's something that they obviously want to clean up. But I think they're making progress with the half court offense. The ball's starting to move a little better. Guys are getting comfortable. And so just kind of continuing on the trajectory that they've been on this past week is going to be important. And they got a little bit of time to work out some kinks outside of games and then carry it over into games. Continue building that confidence before SEC play. It's going to be brutal.
It's not exactly an excuse to be made, but it is crazy to think that there's been times where this season, obviously Jonas Aidoo has been out for the most of the year and he's starting to slowly come back, but you've had the injury to Big Z where he had an ankle problem and he wasn't 100%. You had Trevon Brazil dealing with some injuries, which I like to talk about him specifically here in a second, but then Aidoo Thero, which is illnesses. I don't think I've ever seen a team that has gone through as many, whether it's injuries or illnesses or players being out or whatever it is. And it's got to where, again, it could end up being okay, but it's got to be frustrating for a coach like Calipari and for everybody where it's like, you know what you have and you know what it can be, but things outside of your control is what's keeping you from being able to put it together.
Yeah, 100%. And that's just the guys, like within the season. You think back to the summer, DJ Wagner got on campus with an ankle injury. And so that's something that had to get healed up. John L. Davis missed a bunch of time in the preseason with that wrist. He was in a cast. And so, yeah, I mean, there really are people who hear it and they're like, he's making an excuse or whatever. Yeah, it might be an excuse, but it's true. Like you just haven't had your guys together to be able to work. So it has been kind of fascinating to watch this team just kind of piecemeal it together. And I think it was frustrating to folks early in the year because they weren't just blowing the doors off of some of these mid-major teams. But when you're playing, 6.5 healthy bodies out there, sometimes it's just the way it's going to look. And so what's impressed me about it is despite that, here in the last couple of weeks, what you've seen is an Arkansas team that's gone from just kind of winning games based on talent against inferior opponents to one that is starting to look the part. They're starting to pass the eye test. They're starting to progress and head in the right direction despite not having all those guys. So again, now I'm a little bit more of a believer when John Calipari says, hey, once we get healthy, we get our guys, we figure things out, this team's going to look a lot different once we get, into SEC play, which they're going to have to. Now we're starting to see it. And if they're already making progress when they haven't been 100% and at full strength, then yeah, you could sell me on, hey, these dudes could be pretty good when they are firing on all cylinders with everybody available.
So before we talk about Boogie Fland, because he's definitely worth having a segment, especially since he's SEC Freshman of the Week this week. But one player I do want to ask specifically is about Trevon Brazil, because he was a guy that from last year, he's been at Arkansas for this is his 3rd year now. He's dealt with injuries. There's been some ups and downs. He's never been to the postseason since being at Arkansas, or at least played in the postseason. But yet it seems like over the past couple of games, especially against Michigan and even against UCA, he's really coming into his own. Do you feel like he's found a role, found a comfort level for himself to where he's, not saying anything against Muss or how he was handled, but just feeling like there's some value in what he can do as long as he just does it right in the limited minutes that he actually ends up playing?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, he's a guy who really needed a change of scenery. He got that while being able to stay at the same place with a new coaching staff, new cast of teammates. It's been tough on Trevon. I know he's kind of been a polarizing figure for some Razorback fans, but he's had some bad luck, with injuries, some circumstances that were out of his control, some situations that he probably admittedly would have liked to handle better. And so he needed the clean slate. But then part of it is being willing and able to embrace something different. And he used to, for the past 2 years, rosters have been built around him. And now he's that complementary piece. That's an adjustment to make. And I think this is a good fit. This is not a knock on Eric Musselman, but I don't know that his in your face, yelling, screaming style, I don't know how well that resonates with a guy like Trevon Brazil. Everybody kind of responds differently to different things. Now you got Calipari, who's a player's coach. He's empowering. He's positive, and he's putting a lot of confidence, I think, into Trevon while holding him to a high standard of what he wants from him on the floor. And what you're seeing is kind of it's, yes, he's playing well, but it's the way he's doing it. It's an attitude adjustment for Trevon Brazil. And it's kind of a breath of fresh air to see him because now he's embracing that. He's being a good teammate. He's playing better on the defensive end of the floor in terms of his versatility. And he's bringing that physicality and toughness that we've been asking for and begging for so long. I think about what Kenny Payne said, John, in the summer. He said, hey, move like a guard, think like a big. That is quite literally exactly what Trevon Brazil is doing right now. It's a huge development for this team and happy for him because he's a good guy and you want good things to happen for him. Really, really playing well. And like Cal said, there's even another level to his game that we haven't seen yet.
Can't wait to see it. But we're going to talk about Boogie Fland being the SEC Freshman of the Week and what he has done so far this season, as well as the future for him. And we'll do that here in a second. So stay with us here on the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. All right, Razorback fans, I got to tell you about something that's very important. It's the college football playoffs. You've probably heard of it. It's that time of year, and the college football playoff is officially back with the newly expanded 12-team format. It's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT Sports coverage of the college football playoff begins December 21st, starting with the college football playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern. Leading into our first matchup, the Southern Methodist University Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. So don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the college football playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. We're also presented by our friends over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet up to $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your team wins. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game and you check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, continuing our discussion with Curtis Wilkerson of Inside Arkansas here at the Pod at the Palace edition of Locked On Razorbacks. So, Curtis, not surprising, but still really good to see that Boogie Fland was officially named the SEC Freshman of the Week. Averaged just an easy 18 points, 8 assists, and 3.5 steals in the 2 wins that they had against Michigan and in UCA. He has been so fun to watch this year. We even saw a little bit of him in that Kansas game of how good he is and the type of point guard, even though people kept saying Arkansas didn't have one, the type of point guard he can be. But just how do you even describe the type of game that he is having so far this season, and also the type of player he can be, not only for Arkansas the rest of the year, but the rest of his basketball career too?
Yeah, I mean, he's already exceeding what were high expectations coming into the season. It's hard not to smile when you talk about Boogie because he's such a likable guy. Got that swagger about him, such a fun player to watch. It was really cool at Madison Square Garden, after the game, that big win. And I'm doing the post game show and I'm looking out in the stands. I'm like, there's still an entire section of Madison Square Garden. Like, they're trying to run people out of here. What's going on? And there were literally 100 people there, family, friends, former teammates there to support Boogie, and getting to see him do that in front of those people and then be able to celebrate with him afterwards was awesome. He's been phenomenal for Arkansas. And yeah, the point guard, lack of a point guard allegations have been proven very much wrong. And it's just, like, you knew that Boogie was going to be a playmaker. You knew he was going to be dynamic. You knew he was going to be able to shoot the three. I didn't know that he was going to be a 40% three-point shooter with such volume. I didn't know that he was going to be a guy with a 3-to-1 assist to turnover ratio right out of the gates. I also didn't know that he was going to be a guy that was going to be as impactful defensively as he has been. That's the biggest thing, because he's not the biggest guy in the world. So you wonder, how is he going to hold up on that end of the floor? Very well. He is a pest defensively. He's averaging about 2 steals per game on top of everything else. So good to see him get those honors. It's a big development for Arkansas. 5-star freshmen, McDonald's All-Americans, they're going to play no matter where they're at. But you always wonder about a true freshman lead guard in a conference like the SEC on a team projected to do some big things like Arkansas. And man, he's really answered the bell so far. Continue to be impressed. Wish he would have got that double-double against UCA the other day. Just needed one more guy to make a shot, and he would have got it. That's all right. But no, Boogie's been nothing short of sensational for this team. really making it go, and is honestly playing like a guy that looks like more of a senior than a freshman. It's been really good to watch.
Yeah, and I've loved how he's the type of player that we haven't seen in at least a long time here at Arkansas. People brought up a Kareem Reed back in the day because of the numbers that are being stacked up there. But we know that, hey, listen, great players make other great players great, and that's why you have so much talent on this team. But to me, if you disagree with this or can talk a little bit more on it, Boogie Fland playing his A game and playing as great as he is only going to make everybody else around him better, Arkansas a better team, and also in very clutch situations, which he's proven so far. He can make those plays in clutch situations. Those are three key elements that you can't wait to see continue to grow, but also gives you a lot of confidence in the season moving forward, especially against some big teams and big games in the SEC.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, in a couple of these crunch time games recently, I think about on the road at Miami, against Michigan, like they wanted the ball in Boogie's hands, and Arkansas has some other good options. I think you're seeing the subtle developments in his game. You mentioned making guys around him better. Early in the year, I think he just really had a tendency to go to DJ Wagner, start the offense over there. Now you're seeing him initiate it to other sides, which means a guy like John Davis is getting more involved. That's the kind of stuff that you have to see from a point guard. And so you're absolutely right. And what really stands out to me, I see on the ticker over here, like, is he the key player? It's hard to think about it being anybody else because, I'm sure John Calipari would like to keep these guys as fresh as possible, have more of a rotation. But the truth is, anytime Boogie Fland comes off the floor, it takes about one possession for me to go, they got to get him back in there. This is crazy. And that's not an indictment on the other guys. It's just that he's that good of a player, and that key, that key to the dynamic of what they have going on. Man, get a quick breather, but save most of those for the timeouts. They need him on the floor for 40 minutes. He's that good and that impactful for Arkansas. And I'm really, really looking forward to seeing how he continues to progress, throughout the course of the rest of the season. The competition is going to increase moving forward, but he's only going to get better and better as he gets more experience under his belt. So a really fun player to watch. And like you said, not one that you've seen too often here recently at Arkansas as a freshman guard. He's been really impressive.
Can't wait to see how it all plays out. That is Curtis Wilkerson of Inside Arkansas, contributor here to Locked On Razorbacks. I'm John Nabors. Appreciate each and every one of you listening and watching in. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, as well as on YouTube here on the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. Same podcast time, same podcast channel tomorrow afternoon. Have a great rest of your day, everybody. We'll see you then.